In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizen can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet I ask you, is not an alien force already among us? What could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our peoples than war and the threat of war?
Well, you know, I like talking about ideas as opposed to people. I love the quote from Eleanor Roosevelt, and she said, small minds talk about people, mediocre minds talk about events, great minds talk about ideas. So let's talk about the idea of a Tesla car. That is actually an innovation of old technologies. You know, yeah, the lithium-ion batteries are better than the lead acid or what have you. But you basically have a battery being plugged in to a coal-fired power grid. An actual Tesla, like Nikola Tesla had, that J.P. Morgan famously turned to Tesla and said, if we can't put a meter on it, it's not going to come out. These are big industrialists back then. I call a Tesla actually a Musk, because what Elon Musk has is an innovation of an old technology where you plug in a car to a grid. Now what's the grid? The electric grid. Most people don't know this. It's being run mostly off fossil fuels. Very small percentage of power comes from renewables. So it feels good. So, you know, that whole paradigm needs to change where we say, where are the big breakthroughs that need to happen? And those have not happened yet because they've been suppressed for alleged national security reasons, but in reality it's because the national security state is being run by people with big vested industrial powers. The industrial fascists, just like in the 1800s, early 20th century, that same mindset is running the current economy, the current paradigm of technology. So I think if you look at something like SpaceX, it's using just a more refined version of what Wernher von Braun invented for Adolf Hitler in World War II, called a rocket. Where you burn something, causes a propulsion, shoots it up like a Roman candle. It's not an invention. It's not a breakthrough. So all of those technologies look cool because they're repackaged with maybe some computerized systems. But the fundamental energy and propulsion system that's running the system is very old and really isn't going to fix the environmental crisis, or more importantly, or equally importantly, the macroeconomic crisis, where you have 48% of the world's population doesn't have indoor plumbing yet. So the poverty, the extreme poverty leads to revolutions and violence and radicalism and extremism. All of that and the biosphere collapse isn't going to be fixed by a plug-in electric car. So now I think people like Elon Musk certainly know of these other technologies, but they also know that there have been very fierce and rather nasty things done to people who try to bring them out, up to and including killing them if necessary. I mean, it's suspected that Stan Meyer, who had a car that ran on water using a type of electrolysis, was killed. In fact, right before he collapsed, he says, "I've been poisoned," and collapsed.
It's a major breakthrough that will no doubt make motorists happy. And as Ralph Robinson explains, the Pentagon is also showing lots of interest in this project.
He has developed what's called a water fuel cell. It has taken the place of his old gas tank. The water fuel cell breaks down water molecules into oxygen and hydrogen. The hydrogen is used to run his dune buggy.
I don't care if you use rainwater, well water, city water, ocean water. If you don't have any fresh water, go ahead and use snow. If you don't have any snow available to you, they use salt water because there's no adverse effect to the fuel cell.
The Pentagon flew a lieutenant colonel in last week to look at Meyer's invention. There is talk of possibly using it in the Star Wars defense program and to run Army tanks. Myers is currently perfecting a water fuel cell for cars. It will cost about $1,500. He says it won't need any maintenance, and you won't have to replace it.
And he had other technologies that already had national security orders on them. My group was going to acquire them. It's a very interesting story. He had a toroid, it looked like a donut, that had a national security order on it from the 80s that would run your house. My science advisor and team went to go see this after his heirs made it available for a group to buy. We, at that time, didn't have the resources to get it. An engineering group got it. They were all subsequently assassinated, all of them, except one. One survived. That was up in Michigan. So people don't realize the kind of things that will be done to maintain the hegemony over a fossil fuel based or nuclear power based and utility based centralized energy generation system that benefits a very small elite. And we're talking hundreds of trillions of dollars. If you add up the value of all the oil, gas, coal, nuclear power, public utilities, etc. It's hundreds of trillions of dollars conservatively. And for that, you run into a big buzzsaw. So I think people, a lot of these industrialists that I've met, or people who are, quote, high tech, I say there is no high tech out there. Our civilization has no high technology yet, except in a classified project. The things that are the fundamental energy and power sources that would run a planet properly. So we're a level 1 civilization, peaceful, not destroying the environment. Those have been viciously suppressed for 100 years. And so I've often called this the lost century, where there's an entire century of lost evolution, technology, social development, economic development, et cetera, and so on, because of these big, corrupt, fascist industrial interests. And it was like that in the late 1800s, early 20th century, the time of Nikola Tesla, and it's true of that today. That dynamic has not changed. And that's what we have to make. That's the big change that has to happen. One of the big changes. It's one of the big ones. And that's why we have to do that. Now, Elon Musk had a partner who co-founded PayPal with him, named Peter Thiel. And he wrote a book, From Zero to One, where he talks about this and mentions, I think in the book, he talks about that in 1964, you could fly from JFK to Paris in the same amount of time on a jet as you do now. So how is it from 1945 to now? There's nothing? The minds of humanity have come up with nothing? Think about it. Everyone stop for a minute and meditate on that for 1 second. That's just not possible. So this is why a very mainstream group called the Federation of American Scientists put out a research paper in 2010 that said there were over 5,000 patents that had been confiscated under national security orders, many of them dealing with energy. These are big macroeconomic issues where you have a few big powerhouses, multi-trillion-dollar consortia that are wanting to keep the status quo, and then they have the national security state or the patent office be their lackeys, their shills. And so this is a dynamic that I think has to change, and we have a plan to change that. But it's difficult because the big mistake everybody makes with these technologies, they think, oh, I'm going to build a better mousetrap, and that means that the world is going to be the path to my door. This is what every inventor I've met thinks. The flaw in their thinking is this: before the world finds out about it, Murder Incorporated, as I call it, is going to find a path to your door. And they're going to confiscate your device, and if you don't relent, they're going to confiscate you. And you'll be in prison or you'll be killed or whatever. So you have to find a strategy around these jackbooted thug fascists. I'm very blunt about this. Let's not you can't put lipstick on this pig. That's who and what they are. And meanwhile, the earth is about to flip upside down. Literally. We're doing so much biosphere damage. And that's one of the big pressing issues of our generation. So, for example, this is one of the, an old presidential briefing document for Barack Obama. The first part of it are various government documents, and so one of my favorite ones is this National Reconnaissance Office one that leaked out that lists all the project code names. Now, when you do the briefing, you go, well, here are these. Dreamland. Here, Dreamland is literally listed on this document. It's a National Reconnaissance Office document. So, and then it has Cosmic Ops, Magi. And so people don't understand that's the Majority Intelligence Committee Ops, Cosmic Ops, Royal Ops, all of these, and all these different squadrons. The Sally Corridor, Groom Lake, Dreamland, Ground Star, Blackjack Team. There's Blackjack Control is at Edwards. This is at Nellis, so-called Area 51. And it was a security alert because people were trying to get on the edge of the range and see it, but that's not important. It's the distribution list that was important. Most people don't realize that. And then we also include, some of the disclosure project documents. Well, to be honest, 99.9% of the population of the world would benefit, way out there. The big issue is the people who would be the losers are going to be the people who are very in power. So the people who have all the power are a very small number of people who'd be the losers on that. And more importantly, the centralized power system, that's going to vanish. That's going to go the way of all flesh. Not only power in terms of energy generation, but political power, macroeconomic power, all that's going to change. So it's one of these things where we'll have a whole new world, which is wonderful, but if you're someone with $1 trillion oil field, it ain't wonderful. But those are the people who have outsized amounts of power. It's not democratic. So that's the main thing, is that it's got to happen. It should have happened 100 years ago, and now it's time.
President Trump made an effort to open up files. Actually, what I understand, what he said is he wanted every federal agency to release everything they had on UFOs, UAPs, flying saucers, however you want to put it. I don't think the Biden administration has the same goal. We're talking about two opposing trains of thought. I don't think we're going to see anything from the Biden administration, unfortunately. There's a lot of things that go on and the president does not have access to. If President Biden or even President Trump wanted to go to Area 51, he would have to get permission. It would probably not be denied, but he can't just get Air Force One. No, we're going to go to Area 51 and land. There are a lot of things. The bureaucrats control the secrets within the federal government. Very possibly, depending on their political leanings, that they may be more willing to give information to a current president or a former president. But it's not the president. It is the bureaucrats that control the security and the information within black programs. Even as the president of the United States, I don't believe you're in the position to overstep some of the security protocols that are in place to protect national security. And national security is sort of thrown into everything. It's really a crap statement, because they can say everything is national security. No, it's not. I mean, the existence or the amount of money you're spending on a weapons program, well, that's classified. Why? It's our money. It's our American taxpayer money. Well, why is it classified? Well, you need to know. Yeah, I need to know where you're spending my money, but they don't have to tell you, and there isn't any mechanism for you to pull it out of them.
We are in a society that has been, regardless of what scientists and engineers tell us, we are in a society that has been basically frozen in technology for about 100 years now. Since 1908, we are still using fossil fuels for our vehicles. That has been the case since 1908. That's insane. That's absolutely crazy. And all the technology that connects with real people on the ground basically has not moved forward very much. It's only moved forward very little bits. So this is an artificial situation. This technology, the technology that came out of Roswell, has largely been held back from us. And it is getting ready to burst forward now. It is getting ready to burst forward, regardless of what the people with the Tic Tacs do, where they're withholding all this stuff and keeping it for themselves. But other areas of technology that are also from Roswell, from 1947, this stuff is getting ready to burst forward. And it's going to be an amazing society that we're going to be going into in these next, I would say next year or so. It's going to be an amazing society that we're going to go into.
The government has admitted that they are in possession of vehicles not of this world, and also that they have been seeing these UAPs or these UFOs for many, many years. Now, the reason why the government is talking about these UAPs and UFOs now is because they're getting ready to fund and fuel a lot of money into the Space Force.
On December 20th, 2019, the United States took a giant leap into the next era of military defense. Recognizing the threat to U.S. national interests, a new force was established to protect our freedom to access and operate in space, the United States Space Force. With a mission to keep the space domain secure, stable, and accessible, the United States Space Force will protect U.S. and allied interests in space and provide new and current space capabilities. But this can't be done alone, nor will it be.
So before it was like deny, deny, deny. Now all of a sudden we have UAPs, which are, these are aerial vehicles that we don't know exactly what they really are, but they know what they are. I think that the UAPs are really technologies that we've developed.
There's a whole fleet of them.
This morning, a report that the government cannot explain those mysterious objects caught on video by the military. From an upside-down pyramid-like object hovering above a Navy destroyer to cylindrical spheres disappearing into the ocean.
Splashed. Mark bearing and range.
Based off of alien vehicles that we are in possession of as admitted by them. So I think that they've been reverse engineering this technology for a very, very long time and have now perfected it to the point where when it appears in the sky, the general population thinks it might be an alien, but in actuality, it's technology developed by us. I like to call them ARVs, alien reproduction vehicles.
Now, ahead of the release of a declassified Pentagon report, the New York Times says these papers do little to clarify what the videos show. The New York Times reporting that intelligence officials are worried the videos show America's adversaries may be racing ahead of the U.S. in developing elite weapons technology.
Now, the thing behind this is that the government really needs to find another way to find money to fuel the military-industrial complex. We've gone through every single country, and we've pretty much dominated and brought democracy. And now, so what's happening is the war machine is running out. It's drying up. The money's getting dry. And when the money gets dry, you need a new reason to get the people on board to agree to allow you to use their money. And so what is it going to be? It's going to be the Space Force.
Most of the more than 120 incidents over the past 2 decades are not from the U.S. military or other advanced U.S. government technology.
Whoa, it's getting close.
The Times also reports the Pentagon has found no evidence that the phenomena are aliens.
There's a suppression of the news. The major media doesn't want to share with you the real truth of what's going on above our heads every single day. They continue to use fake UFO videos on a daily basis talking about the UAP phenomenon. It's ridiculous. We've actually caught them in a lie, showcasing what looks to be some kind of swarm of UFOs. But when you look at the footage that they show on national television, they're showing you what is a phone app, which showcases UFOs in the sky But in fact, it's a simple app that you could download and film in the sky and make it appear that there's UFOs swarming everywhere. This goes along with the major media narrative of UFOs. They're everywhere, they're a threat, and they're coming for us. But in fact, they're showing us an app that is totally false. This is absolutely ridiculous. When the true evidence is coming from the public themselves, when we receive over 1,000 videos every year right at third phase of moon, we reach out to the major media saying, hey, take a look at this. The major media refuses to accept videos from the public. They only want to use the military threat narrative and these blurry videos when the public has much, much better evidence and the major media doesn't want to show it. Such as an incredible sighting of what people were saying that looks like a space station traversing across the moon. Whatever was captured was high in the stratosphere, some kind of experimental, again, exotic form of propulsion. Once we put the video out on third phase of moon, they were forced to admit again that this indeed was some kind of secret experimental program in regards to sniffing the atmosphere. Whatever it was, again, more videos exposing high exotic craft.
Well, I've actually had a lot of meetings with people who are initially very supportive, and then they get a visit. And they either are threatened or they're afraid, they realize what the ramifications are, and they back off. So this is why we sort of gave up on the political and the moneyed people and did it as a grassroots disclosure effort back many years ago. So that's the big problem, is how are you going to get this out? If you want to benefit the whole planet and the whole population of the planet, you can't be thinking you're going to do this through politicians who are innately going to be bought off or threatened. Because those are people who, this is what they do. They put their finger in the air and say, which way is the wind blowing? And that's the way they're going to go. So, and the public is going to have to decide if they want to do this themselves. This is why we took the whole disclosure project public. So that's what we're doing. What most people, they think that the U.S. government builds stuff. They contract. It's called WFO, work for others. And in 1993, I was at the Wrigley Mansion in Phoenix. And Jordy Hormel, the Hormel meat family, had bought it. There was a covert group that had kind of taken over his operation. And I was there, and they wanted me to come to a meeting very late at night. And we're sitting around this big conference table at midnight with a bunch of suits. And this is in 1993, a couple months before I briefed the CIA director. And there was a man there. He says, look, if you want to deal with this issue of these technologies, the UFO issue, you don't need to talk to the president, the CIA director. They don't know anything, and they're not going to know anything. You should be talking to people like us. We're the ones who are running the WFO. We'll work for other, it's called, programs. And we're tied into certain, I'm quoting, orders of Jesuit priests that are working on the technology transfer. We have the supercomputers that back up the banking system, and where we can get a lot of money just from transactions where they're odd amounts. We're the one, and he went through this whole litany. And he started explaining this to me because he was basically trying to wave me off from going forward with this meeting with the director of the CIA. And it was when I realized that, sort of the people who think that the government's running everything, and there's this top-down president, commander-in-chief, et cetera, but that system got decapitated in the 50s, mid to late 50s. Which is what Eisenhower warned about when he left office, when he said we're the military-industrial complex. So what took its place? Well, what took its place was this sort of hybrid entity, partially covert, unacknowledged government programs, but a big part of that is then outsourced to big corporations, covert contractors, and other organizations. So that's kind of what developed in the post-World War II era, and it's how the operation runs.
So if someone was actually to go against the government and try to attempt to release this to the world. Personally, I don't think it could be done because they don't put all their eggs in one basket. They don't follow the policy of single point failure. They have multiple repositories where they keep all this stuff. Absolutely, Los Alamos, Oak Ridge National Labs, MacDill Air Force Base, Edwards Air Force Base, the remote test site in Nevada, also known as Air Force Flight Test Center Detachment 3. That's the actual terminology for Groom Lake facility. So for someone to try to bust down the walls.
These were the folks who finally tried it, a few dozen running toward an entrance of Area 51, the secretive military
It's not going to
base.
happen. You'd have to go to all these facilities, get into their vaults, then bring that out as a united coalition. Not one person couldn't do it. It would take a united coalition of acknowledged scientists to come forward with it. That's how it would happen.
How long will something stay classified? You know, when will we see it? And when we do see something, how old is it? Typically, if the federal government, you know, the bureaucrats, the spooks, the guys that handle and work in the classified environment, if they're going to release something, it's probably was built, flown, operated, and tested 20 years ago. So any new technology you see that the federal government is releasing, as far as maybe the B-21 radar or anything else, that's old technology. Holding and being responsible for security is a very, very powerful feeling. So if you're a security administrator and it's your job to maintain the security, you're in a real powerful position because you can destroy someone's career. They'll only release it if it's to their advantage. Other than that, I don't think the American public or the public in general is going to have any idea what we're up to, what the government's up to.
So the truth is, even Rumsfeld admitted the day before 9/11, there's 2.3 trillion with a T dollars unaccounted for in the Department of Defense budget. Probably now it's 8 or 10 trillion. Those go into these unacknowledged projects that are deep black. The Congress has no idea where it's going. The President has no idea where it's going. So, the real issue is, it's sort of a complete corrupt, unconstitutional ripoff. And, but nobody wants to take on that system because they're lethal, vicious people. So. And the truth of the matter is, if you do someone who, let's say you have a senior Department of Justice person to investigate this, they won't be told anything. They'll be told basically get lost. So by the definition, these projects are illegal and unconstitutional, and so they don't care about a subpoena, and they don't care about the chain of command, they don't care about the Constitution. They'll just say, buzz off, we're not going to tell you anything. So that's actually how it runs. I mean, people have to totally redo their civics lesson that they learned in high school is not how this country runs anymore, and not since the late 50s, my opinion.
So before, when money would go black budget and people would go, well, where's these trillions and trillions of dollars going? And they had no answer. Now they can say, look, there's these UAPs that are harassing our Marine ships and appearing over our nuclear installments. And so they're a threat to national security. They're a threat to global security. We need your money so that we can build space tech. We need spaceships. We need weapons in space. We need different types of weaponized satellites. And so now all of a sudden they found a new way to garner the support of the people of the world by building this space threat.
Since 1917, the Air Force Research Laboratory has been leading the discovery, development, and delivery of warfighting technologies for our air, space, and cyberspace forces. Already on board, AFRL is continuing to provide the technology and resources necessary to help the United States Space Force build a comprehensive military advantage in space.
And so by building the space threat concept into mind, that fear, of course, we're going to say, take our money, apply all these trillions towards this defense. Don't worry about schooling and education. Don't worry about health care. Don't worry about retirement money. We need to protect our planet against alien invasion. And so that's what the drive is behind it. The mainstream media like CNN and Fox are showing these very strange, obscure, obfuscated images, very fuzzy radar images of UFOs with kind of, very staticky accounts from military personnel. And so what they're doing is they're dropping seeds. They're dropping seeds on the general population and getting them to believe that they're real, believe that they actually exist now, because they want to get that money out of us. They want to fund a space force. And so what they want to do is they want to keep it very obscure to where you can't fully exactly really see what it is, because they have something that they want you to see when they finally make that big push, potentially, in my theory, personally, this is my own theory, that they will, do like another Gulf of Tonkin incident where they faked an attack to go into the Vietnamese War, things like that. I think that there's this potential fake attack that's going to come, and and then and only then will you see a very clear image, and it'll be probably something that we developed ourselves, probably along the lines of a false flag where, they claim it's an alien attack, but it probably isn't really aliens. And the reason why I think this is because you look at the accounts of aliens over the millennia.
And if you look closely at the top left and right corners, you can see that objects, they appear to be some sort of flying crafts. The ships are dome-like with 3 trails coming out of the bottom, and UFO enthusiasts insist this is proof that flying saucers were present during the death of Jesus.
You go into ancient tablets, texts, scriptures, cylinder scrolls, and again now into the modern idiom where you have people seeing them on cell phones, recording them with HD cameras.
Va demasiado rápido, loco, no lo sé. Está yendo rapidazo, loco.
And we have the better copy, better quality imagery of them. We can see them, even in places people have seen them with their own naked eye.
Is it going down or is it going? It looks like a spaceship.
What happens here is they don't want you to know that these beings have never threatened us. So far, I mean, as far as we know, in modern times, they haven't tried to eradicate us, they haven't tried to destroy us, they haven't come guns blazing to destroy our cities and kill the people. And so I really believe that they want to paint a different picture about these beings, a picture that they can control the image in our minds so that they can control the support, the fear, and also the money.
When it gets right in front of me, it just disappears. Disappears. Like gone.
To be clear, he's referring to this giant object as a Tic Tac because he said it was shaped like one. Now, 3 other crew members with that pilot saw the same thing. Are these objects a national security concern?
Jeremy Corbell launched a video that made the media explode with excitement. A UFO, triangular-shaped craft that were captured off the coast of California by a Navy sailorman that wants to remain anonymous. From closer inspection by a debunker named Mick West, who did his own little mock-up, which he created the same effect that was captured by this Navy sailor.
This UFO video does not show a pyramid. There's a triangle shape, but that looks exactly like an effect caused by a bright light being out of focus and a night vision camera with a triangular iris like this one.
What we're seeing is the result of a bokeh lens. If you look inside the iris, it has a triangular trifecta shape. Anything projected off in the distance of the camera that would seem blurry would mimic the effect of a trifecta. This is what we're looking at. You notice the FAA lights blinking on the object itself, and people are claiming these are pyramidal shapes that are flying in the sky, where in fact all it is a distortion of the lens known as a bokeh effect. UFOs reported by FAA pilots have come in. We received audio from a ham radio operator who was able to intercept the American Airlines pilot. Actually explains to the tower control that something fast was in close proximity to the commercial airliner. He says it looks like a cruise missile.
We just had something go right over the top of us that, I hate to say this, looked like a long cylindrical object.
We obtained the audio from Jim Goodall and then shared it across the media platform. They refused to touch it. They thought it was a hoax. And then until 5 days later, they reveal it to the world. This is how the major media operates. They don't want to share you the truth, and when they got it, they suppress it. Very interesting indeed when they're pushing off CGI and late news when the news is already there.
It almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast.
The close encounter happened early Sunday afternoon while the American Airlines flight was passing over New Mexico en route to Arizona.
Have any targets up here? We just had something go right over the top of us.
The radio call was noticed by an airline radio enthusiast who says the call caught his attention because the pilot sounded very excited.
After the American Airlines reported the UFO in close proximity to the commercial airliner, we received paperwork the day after, leaked document from Southwest Airlines of what appears to be a notification to everybody and all pilots to report anything unusual that was happening in the sky. Later, we received confirmation from the military that indeed there was some kind of secret military testing going on. What are they experimenting on? Is it the Tic Tac or some high exotic form of meta-propulsion?
Why is the major media picking up on these UFO videos that seem controversial? We have the Go Fast, the gimbal, the Tic Tac, which really doesn't give us much evidence of anything. All we're seeing is blurry images. Louis Elizondo says that this is basically the bottom of the barrel that the Pentagon has released. What's up with that? Why haven't they give us, the people, full disclosure of these videos? Pilot Fravor claims that he was within 50 feet of the Tic Tac itself, and insiders from the Pentagon also claim that they do have video of this event. This would basically blow the lid on everything if we could get crystal clear detail and the full effect from beginning and end of these so-called UFO videos. It seems like the major media and the Pentagon Congress seem to be tied in coordination with this disinformation effort to keep the UFO secrecy deep behind the shadows. There's above top secret access to the hidden technology behind disclosure. Is the world ready for it?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of people are confused about how something like this could be structured. And they're always talking about, well, you know, what about China versus this country or Great Britain? It has nothing to do with that. So we think in terms of our high school civics lessons where there's the US, Canada, we're looking at geopolitical boundaries on the globe of the earth. The group that runs these classified projects has been for decades, at least since the 60s, transnational, meaning that they've had operatives and projects in Brazil or China or the old Soviet Union. And at that level of unacknowledged special access projects, many of them work together. So when people say, well, you know, is it just a US and UK or Five Eyes? Five Eyes being the, you know, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, United States, Great Britain, spy, satellite and intelligence gathering and sharing consortium. I said, no, it isn't. It depends on the country and what assets they want to have and who they have on the ground who can actually be functional. For example, that CIA document talking about going to Argentina and Brazil, conducting fake alien abductions, that meant that the agency, the CIA, had to have assets to cooperate with that in those countries, right? So I think that people have to kind of forget their high school civics lessons. And rethink what the geopolitical realities are when you're dealing with something at this scale.
But governments can't die. So we need to find other incentives for bureaucracy to adapt and improve. The technology revolution has transformed organizations across the private sector. But not ours, not fully, not yet. We are, as they say, tangled in our anchor chain. Our financial systems are decades old. According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
Well, you don't just have $2, $3, $10 trillion vanish. There's a whole system in place, and it comes from many different budgets. And then a big part of the funding comes from private endeavors. So let's say you spin off a technology, such as the stuff we're using that we're calling high tech. Well, a lot of it was spun off, as Colonel Corso described, from R&D on some of the ET reverse engineering, extraterrestrial devices. But the companies that are allowed to have those and hand off to have people embedded in them who are part of this consortium. And therefore you can develop a $1 trillion company or a multi-$100 billion computer chip company or whatever, and some of that money also can feed into it. So it isn't just government, it's private and government together. So I call this a hybrid entity that's neither strictly government nor strictly private. And interestingly, from a secrecy point of view, as a private entity, corporate or citizen, penetrate these projects, it's top secret national security. Most of the work being done on this are private corporations, Northrop, Raytheon, the old E-Systems, EG&G, and they'll say, it's proprietary, you see? So if you come from the government, it's proprietary. If you come from corporate or civilian, it's top secret government. So they kind of wall it off, they play that game.
Releasing the information, not releasing the information on things that they've been flying, chasing our airplanes or submarines or naval ships and whatever. They're going to release the information on this stuff if it's to their advantage. As long as there's no advantage of releasing to the public, then they're going to keep it. They're going to keep it covered up.
People need to wake up to that fact. Wake up to the fact that we have this psychological operation, that now we have government officials that are part of this, that are working in black parts of the Pentagon. Black meaning unaccountable, unlimited funding, and don't have to answer to anyone.
A government source says there were no glitches, and the veteran Navy pilots are very credible.
As it gets in front of me, it just goes poof and it's gone. It's gone like that fast.
Carl Sagan said extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And if the crash retrievals are true that we've heard for so long now, where's the physical evidence? It's got to be within government labs, different facilities, universities. It sounds great on paper, but we need that physical evidence. Barring that physical evidence, we're not going to move this field forward. And if the crash retrievals are true, then all bets are off. If those stories are true, then they do have the debris. They do have the saucers, they do have the bodies, and they've been working on this for 60, 70, perhaps 80 years.
So whatever you can think of, whatever you can imagine as a technology or a possibility, whatever you can think of, it's already been done. It's not even a question anymore. And I'm talking about everything. Portal technology, teleportation, faster than light travel, FTL, all these things are now possible and pure reality.
And just turns abruptly and starts mirroring me. So as I'm coming down, it starts coming up.
So it's mimicking your moves.
Yeah, it was aware we were there.
And I really do believe that these ARVs, I call them, or they call them UAPs, that have been buzzing our military ships out there, our marine ships in the ocean and so forth, and coming by bases, are made by us. I believe that they know exactly who made them. We made them. I think that they are alien reproduction vehicles that they've taken reverse engineered technology from previous down UFOs and basically put them together, created our own technologies that we are flying around in. They've already declassified the stealth bomber and all these other craft during the 9/11. This is the stuff that's behind the scenes for the next level of war. And these craft most likely can fly in the atmosphere and also probably go into outer atmosphere as well. And so I believe that they are actually ours, and they're painting the picture as if they're not ours, but I really do believe that they're made by private corporations in America or somewhere on this planet. And the reason why they use private corporations is because if you use a government organization, then we can do a Freedom of Information Act and we can find out what's going on. But when you go into a private corporation and you subcontract it out, then the private corporation doesn't have to disclose any information to the general public at all.
So these are some of the tapes from Asilomar, the 1995 gathering of the original whistleblowers and Disclosure Project witnesses. But at that time, if you look at it, it says Starlight, Project Starlight. So if you look at the documents from the Clinton library, where the Associated Press sued the Clinton administration to get them, it was the project, it was just called the Starlight Coalition. And there's a letter that we wrote, all of us gathered there, including some friends of the president who were there, recommending that he declassify the subject, disclose the UFO issue, etc. So this was about a year and a half after I briefed R. James Woolsey, the CIA director for President Clinton. So by then, we decided, let's get together a number and try to find some new people. So we had Marina Popovich from the old Soviet Union, who was a cosmonaut, who had had a sighting. Her husband, Pavel Popovich, would be like our Neil Armstrong. We had, of course, Edgar Mitchell was there as my guest. It was one of his early meetings for this. And then we had some people who had handled the Roswell materials, a whole bunch of different people. And it was called, you know, Project Starlight back then. Because at that time, it was still a kind of unofficial civilian effort to get the president. And then later, after this, in '97, the Congress to take the leadership on this. So we wouldn't have to do it. But they wouldn't, so we ended up doing the Disclosure Project in 2001.
I want to emphasize that all of these witnesses each could speak for probably anywhere from 2 to 5 hours about what they have witnessed. We were trying to give you a snapshot. We have another 400 of these witnesses. I have carried this burden for 8 years. I'm now giving it to you, the American people and the people of the world, to take it forward.
But this was the very first gathering of these Disclosure Project witnesses, military, CIA, and those tapes were stolen from me by the man I trusted to film. The people who did the filming colluded with a Clinton administration guy who was sort of a operative to take all those films and recordings and not give them to us. And so they vanished for 26 years. I get a letter a couple weeks ago, and the entire collection was buried in the backyard in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, by this Clinton guy who called my friend up and said, look, you know, I'm getting older, and he was starting to have some, maybe Alzheimer's, I'm not sure. And so he says, I have these, I'm gonna send them to you. So then all of a sudden, this guy says, look, I think Dr. Greer would wanna have these. So he writes me this letter, and he says, I have all the Asilomar tapes from 1995. So we just received those, and we're digitizing them, trying to get them on hard drives from the old big boxy VHS tapes. But a lot of people don't know that history of how it went from the CE5 contact and the event that happened in Florida in '92 to the intelligence community finding out about what we were doing, and others, the friendlies and the people who were, I call them the white hats and the black hats. And then they came wanting to, you know, influence and stop what we were doing with CE5 contact, the bad actors. But there were others who were friendly. So that's how the whole Disclosure Project evolved, was out of the CE5 contact that happened, because they knew it was real. I mean, it's the thing that people tease me the most about, but it's actually the foundation of the entire Disclosure Project. Let's go, we can go out to where we've done CE5 out in the meadow down here. It's great to be able to go anywhere. You know, when we're doing CE5 in really remote areas, sometimes you get into situations where you want to be really out, where there's not going to be a lot of interference from humans. So I tend to prefer really remote sites if I can get there. Some years ago, I was invited to go to an underground research facility in El Paso on the Mexican-American border. And it's a long story how this all got set up, but I was invited to come there because they were very supportive of what I was doing, and they had gotten permission. And this was a place where they were doing these sort of technologies that are trans-dimensional, but medical applications. Major stuff. I mean, as a doctor, they knew I'd be interested because I was dealing with trans-dimensional interstellar technologies. When I'm at the airport, I'm going to transfer at Houston, and there's this guy following me around with a long beard and everything. And I thought, who is this, a spook or something? It turned out it was Billy F. Gibbons of ZZ Top. He somehow knew one of the scientists in this lab. How, I can't remember. And he says, look, hey doc, I know you're going to this meeting. Can I come? I said, well, if it's okay with them, it's okay with me. I'm their guest. He says, yeah, it's okay. he says, well, if you'll let me come, I got a seat for you in first class. It was really funny. I said, okay, that's good. So let's do it. So we go there and we go into this office and then we go underground, and they have technologies that literally, electromagnetic transdimensional technologies where they can, if someone had a missing limb, they can attach to the subtle body, you know, the mystics call astral body, but that energy, like you have phantom pain, and regrow it. If someone had a severed spinal column, which I've seen too much of, you know, I mean, 16-year-old boys diving into a pool and, you know, boom, they're paralyzed from the neck down. That was all stuff that they could repair, but the technology, here's the issue. The same technology that gives you that would give you free energy to run your house, because it's in that same, let's call it constellation of extraordinary technologies that they would want to keep secret. So there are a lot of spin-offs beyond energy, propulsion, and the environment that will benefit humanity once we can get the first level of this out, because it's unbelievable how backward even our medical technology is compared to what's possible. So that's also a very bit of good news from the point of view of medical healing technologies, really advanced technologies. This is why I've called for sort of a Marshall Plan for the planet for new energy and the environment that is supported and funded by individuals in an open source way, and not expecting, I think it's, you know, silly to expect the government of the United States or any other government to get behind doing something that brings out the most disruptive technologies in the history of the human race. Let's be blunt. I mean, everyone thinks that Silicon Valley is disruptive. There's nothing disruptive about the stuff that's come out of Silicon Valley. It's all peripheral around the edges. This really is, frankly, disruptive, but it also creates a new civilization, and it saves our future. So if this had been introduced slowly from the early 20th century, 100 years ago, to now, we'd be okay. But now we've run out of time because of what's happening to the biosphere, geopolitically, population boom. So in order to create you know, enough change quickly enough, we're going to have to do something very different, very fundamentally different than what we've been doing.
Will this day of disclosure come? Personally, I don't see it coming on the near horizon. And the way I look at it, and I know a lot of people don't like to talk about this, but you know, hey, let's roll with it. Every day that goes by, every day that we live, every minute that goes by, Philip Klass's curse comes more true every day.
There is no more exciting story that I could write or Aviation Week could publish than to say, at last, we've come across one UFO report that cannot be explained in prosaic terms.
And so his curse was, you will not know anything more about UFOs today than you will on your deathbed. And when on your deathbed, you won't know anything more about UFOs on your deathbed either. So that's becoming true. If we don't take the bulls by the horn and make a management decision within this whole field of ufology, all of us are going to keep on tricking down that timeline. We'll all pass away and we won't know the truth. That's why we got to get drastic with this and take the bulls by the horn and roll with it.
We just want to know what in the hell are those things that are up in the air. There's something out there. And I think we as allegedly, you know, free people, we need to have the ability to find out the truth. And the truth is not going to come from the federal government. The truth is not going to come from established journalism. The truth is going to come from individuals going out and say, screw this, I'm going to find out what it is. I'm going to go camp out in the desert. I'm going to get a good camera. I'm going to shoot something, not with a gun, with a camera, and maybe be able to open up the can of worms and find out what's true and what's bullshit.
I really believe that there's definitely a script being written and for these reporters and these anchor men and women to continue to regurgitate the same information over and over again. No matter what channel you turn it to, it's always now UAP, threat to security, over our nuclear bases. When you look at the real historical information based on what these UFOs have done in the past, the real UFOs, they have come to military bases. And what have they done? They deactivated the nukes. They didn't activate them and launch them.
And either way, these things are being witnessed by some of our best fighter pilots. They're being picked up on electro-optical devices such as gun camera footage, and then it's furthermore being substantiated by radar data. So we know they're real, whatever it is.
And so, you know, if you're an advanced civilization and you're a million years ahead of a planet like us, and you're flying by and you detect technology with your sensors array, and you go, oh, let me take a look over here real quick, and all of a sudden you take a quick look at the planet, you go, wow, they've got a defense system on this planet. And then you scan the defense system and you realize that the defense system is not aimed into space to garner against an outside threat. It's aimed to point back at itself. They can scan the missile trajectories. They have this technology. They can see that they're all pointed back at the Earth itself. And so they're thinking, these people aren't that intelligent. I mean, they've got bombs pointed at themselves. And so, you know, to show, hey, we need this planet for the future. This is a great planet. It's got a lot of abundant life. It's very abundant. This is a great outpost in the galaxy. We're not going to let you guys destroy this planet. So we're going to just deactivate these nukes and show you our true power. So instead of saying on the news, hey, they came to our base and they deactivated the nukes and they're trying to tell us, you know, don't destroy ourselves, they say, no, they came to our bases and it's a threat to our national security. They accessed our nuclear devices. You see how they just put a spin on it to change how you feel on the inside about what these beings are doing.
Well, I think a lot of the problem has happened in the last 30, 40, 50 years, actually, is it's very easy to distract people with digital, social media, entertainment, that sort of thing. That's the modern bread and circus. And so people aren't focused on either the gravity of the problem, frankly, which is more severe than people realize, or, in my opinion, the real solutions. Think about it. 1955 was the dawn of the Eisenhower interstate system. And that's 66 years ago. We already had anti-grav, so-called, or electrogravitic propulsion in October of '54, mastered. Before that, decades before that, we had Tesla-type zero-point energy, what he called the infinite energy field. So what are we doing here? You know, we're talking 2/3 of a century to a century where this could happen. Now, I think in terms of natural evolution of the planet, let's take a big step back. There probably would have been an industrial era for 50 to 70 years in the 1800s, where we would have been using these things where you dig coal up or pull oil out of the ground and burn it. And then there should have been this revolution in electromagnetic field propulsion and energy and all these things. But the big industrialists in the late 1800s, early 1900s are, you know, the same consciousness of greed, and quite frankly, stupid greed, that ruled the roost then is what's ruling the roost in 2021. So I think the people are going to have to unite and say, we've had enough of this. But for them to reach that conclusion, they have to get educated on the fact that these technologies are real, that the UFO is real, that we figured out how they fly, that they are not burning rocket fuel or Jet A fuel from Exxon to fly around like you see them in these videos. They're using a totally different technology, which has been figured out. For example, I think Nova or PBS did a story about how during the peace movement, they did a FOIA request, and it turned out, like in New York City, if people were protesting the Vietnam War and they were organizing, there would be like 16 people at a meeting, and 12 of them were on the payroll of the New York City intelligence unit or the FBI or somebody. So, and they all look like hippies, talk like hippies. So what you find is, when you're dealing with the UFO subject, which is the biggest secret in the history of the United States, remember the Wilbur Smith top secret document from Canada from 1950, it states explicitly that this issue is the biggest secret in the history of the United States, exceeding the secrecy of the development of the hydrogen bomb. And this was a year or two before we detonated the first hydrogen bomb. So when you look at that, you realize what kind of assets would be deployed to capture a movement trying to disclose this subject, trying to make contact And so that's what you see. I mean, I always tell people, you see the dog and pony shows going on in the mainstream media, that's called capture. And the intelligence community will then infiltrate and capture a movement. And they've done that to the meditation movements, they've done it to the environmental movements, they've done it to the peace movements, because it's very easy to do. It's all undercover operatives. Nobody would ever guess that's who they are. So I learned about that the hard way in the 90s, where we had people who became embedded in my project. They ended up being operatives, and so we'd have to remove them. You know, it's like when I was at Lawrence Rockefeller's ranch in Wyoming, the JY Ranch there in the Tetons, and he said, Dr. Greer, the disclosure of this and these technologies, the implications are so vast and so profound that no aspect of life on Earth will be unaffected by it. I said, yes, Lawrence, that's why it's secret. It's not secret because it's trivial. You know, they haven't killed people and subverted the democratic institutions of the United States and Canada and Europe for nothing. It's because it is so profound. The implications are so vast that every aspect of life on Earth will be changed. So for that, for people who are defending hundreds of trillions of dollars in industrial, commodity, oil, et cetera, and so forth, assets, they'll do a lot. I think this is why I've always been very cautious, since I'm being burned rather badly back in the early to mid 90s. Remember the Asilomar tapes that I showed earlier, that was a complete betrayal of my trust by a couple of people who were embedded in the operation, who are actually I found out later, were working for somebody else. But I didn't know who they were, you know, and you're not gonna be able to do a search on them or even a private eye. It's not gonna pop up. These are black projects. So this is why you have to be very, very careful. And when you're dealing with something as important as the fact that we're not alone in the universe, but also the technologies that get them here and back have been figured out, but would completely alter the way this planet operates and the people who benefit from the system. I mean, the average Joe Blow driving his pickup truck who's a carpenter isn't benefiting from ExxonMobil, right? I mean, he has to pay, you know, whatever, $4 a gallon for gas and all that kind of, and the maintenance. If you had these other systems, there'd be no energy cost. So the average person, that's why I said yesterday, 99.99999% of the world's population wants to have disclosure even though they don't know about it. They want these technologies even though they've never heard of them. But you know, that's the problem. This is why we have to get the message out. That's why, you know, keep, you know, doing documentaries and educational things, because you have to raise awareness first. And then from there, you can actually make change happen. This is kind of fun. My whole thing is that I realized, you know, there was in 1991, I met with a man who said, if you're going to do what you're going to do, you have to have millions of people who know who you are and support, because otherwise you're, quote, a dead man walking. And then he told me what I need to do about a dead man trigger. So even by the early 90s, I mean, obviously I was asked to brief the director of the CIA in 93. We had an amazing collection of stuff. A lot of that is in storage places all over the world with people holding them, that if something happens to me, it comes out. But we didn't really stand that system up quickly enough. So between 93 and 98, you know, several people on my team died under strange conditions. And I had some serious threats, and there's been ongoing problems. But I think that around 1997, 98, there were some people who came to me who have worked this issue for a long time, 40, 50 years, who are on our side of the argument, of the advocacy to bring this out, who said, look, do you want protection from these sort of elements? I said, yes, so we have that now. So since 98, no one on my team has been threatened or hurt. So we try to put people under that umbrella. This is one of the cautionary tale. When Stan Meyer's collection of technologies were acquired by this other entity, and I didn't know exactly who they were at the time. It was not an open situation. They were known only as an engineering group in Michigan. And I said to the heirs of Stan Meyer's technologies that whoever gets it, tell them they have to do it open source in front of the whole world. The whole world's going to be watching this technology being refined, developed, released, without any intellectual property holdback, without patent. Because otherwise, they're not going to survive their launch. It'll blow up on the launch pad. And that's what happened. And I got this call a couple years later from Lord, I won't say his last name, in Great Britain, who had ended up being the money behind that acquisition, which is how they were able to outbid my group to get it. And he says, these people are running for their lives. They've gotten the systems running, and these would change the world. But they are looking for an eco-friendly country that they can get to because they're being threatened in America. I said, you'd have to go to another star system. There's no place on this planet where the henchmen of these kind of Fourth Reich fascists won't find you. And so he said, well, what do I do? So I wrote a 2 or 3 page memo to this guy, Lord so-and-so, which I can share with you. That's a whole strategic plan of what they need to do within a few hours to survive and not be assassinated and not have the technology confiscated. They wouldn't do it. They were still like, it's like Lord of the Rings, they're my precious holding on to the ring. Precious! Ironically, in this case, it was a ring, it was a toroid, donut-shaped energy. And they didn't want to let go of the greed and profit motive. They wanted to be the next Rockefellers of energy, you see. So that is the Achilles heel for people. They see dollar signs, they see power, they see money. So they make all the strategic errors. So I wrote out a strategic plan of what they could do to save their lives and save the technology and get it out to the world. Because you're talking about the ability to stand up in an industrial energy infrastructure to replace everything our entire planet uses. You need 1,000 companies that are trillion-dollar companies to do it in enough time to save the biosphere. So I said, this shouldn't be about money or power. It should be about the purpose. And you'll do very well by doing good. But they wouldn't listen. Next thing I know, I meet with a guy in Orange County, California, who knew one of the people who was with that engineering team. And the man said this guy came in, was crying like a baby because every single one of them had been killed and the technology vanished, as we predicted. And see, this is what's frustrating, is that for 30 years, I keep running across this opportunity. People keep making the same predictable errors. You're dealing with something that's making a frontal run at the most powerful interests in the world, on the planet, bar none, period. And you cannot have a strategic plan that doesn't account for that. But that's what everyone, so it's like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So I spent a number of years trying to work with people like that to satisfy their materialistic view and intellectual property view, and realized it was never going to happen because they kept vanishing or being threatened, or next thing you know, they're rich, driving a Lamborghini and wearing $5,000 suits, but the technology's gone into the black pit of Calcutta. It's gone. So after, about 25 years of that, I said, no more. There's a certain way this had got to happen. We know how it can happen. And if people would follow that strategic plan, you'd have a chance of surviving. It's still a heavy lift because you have massive, powerful interests that do not want these technologies out. And that's why the people who've dealt with the UFO-related technologies and classified projects, they're terrified to be identified. I have a lot of them on my team who've actually worked on them, built them. But, they know the kinds of enforcement that's been used to keep this secret. One of the things that was surprising to me is in 1997, when I was briefing one of the 5 directors of NASA, Dr. Nancy Maynard, and her boyfriend was Dr. Bob Carell, who was Deputy Director of National Science Foundation. So I first met with him in DC. My science advisor set up the meeting at the National Science Foundation headquarters, and they were both in charge of, for the National Science Foundation, and Dr. Maynard, she was in charge of the mission to planet Earth doing the satellite imaging on climate change. So they were both climate change scientists. And they reached out to me, and I went through the technologies, how they operate, how there needs to be institutional support to fund and bring out these technologies so that we can get completely off all these environmentally damaging technologies, including nuclear. And they were very interested, but then when I said, now will you help me do this? Because I'm a doctor, I don't have the resources. You know, I'm working full-time as an emergency doctor, trying to support a family of 6. I said, I'm not a billionaire, I can't fund something like this, but the National Science Foundation can, or NASA can. And they both said, we want to know about this, but if we do it, it'll be the end of our careers. Now think about this, their lives dedicated, PhDs, to fixing this problem. The solution is put on a silver platter by my team. And they go, well, the fate of the planet here, my careerism here. They chose their career. Take that experience, multiply it 1,000 times at least. In 30 years of me doing this, that's why the world is in the state it's in. Because people are putting their own selfish interests, their own fears ahead of the planet we're leaving our children and grandchildren. So I think it's a very serious issue. And people think, you know, I mean, these people put their pants on one leg at a time, and so do I. But at a certain point, you have to make the decision, what are we going to do? Are we going to let the whole thing just, you know, slip through our fingers and crash? Or are we going to come together as a people and fix it? That's the chapter we don't know. We'll see. You know, I've been advocating to get this fixed to people like the president, all the way back to Bill Clinton's era, and everyone since. But what I've concluded is that it's going to have to be, since we live down the road here from Thomas Jefferson's house, we the people. I think we the people are going to have to come together and figure out how to do it, which includes financially, the funding. You know, you look at the money that goes into, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars to save the sea turtle, or to do this thing or that from private philanthropists. A fraction of that going into a new energy research and development lab, open source, where all the breakthroughs are streamed in real time online, just given away to the public, would cost a fraction of that. And you'd save the entire biosphere and all the oceans. But you have to have people who understand it and are willing to be angel funders to do it. Otherwise, you know, prying these technologies out of the government, unacknowledged projects, ain't gonna happen. I'm very skeptical of that. So I think that we really have to figure out another strategy, which is why I pivoted from doing all these things with the government in the 90s to doing the Disclosure Project 20 years ago. Because I don't think that what I came to understand is that people in those kind of positions are always looking at climbing the ladder, whether it's corporate or government, about power, about careerism. Like these folks who walked away from doing something on this, even though they avowed that this was the purpose of their life, the raison d'etre, the reason their great passion was this. But what they really ended up wanting to do, let's study the problem, but not do anything meaningful to fix it. See, this is the problem. So we're willing to spend trillions of dollars on ineffective policies right now in 2021, but no one's talking about something that would actually fix the problem. Because the solution is viewed as worse than the disease. The cure is worse than the disease in the minds of the power people, the people with the elite global power. Because it means, look, I mean, if you've got a big mutual fund with $1 trillion in it, half those stocks will be penny stocks because they're energy and transportation and whatever related, and utilities. But that's going to have to happen at some point. So these are really hard decisions. I mean, I'm not trying to trivialize it. I mean, if it was an easy thing to do, it would have been done. It's because, as I said earlier, the implications, I mean, ironically, you know, a descendant of John D. Rockefeller says this to me, Lawrence, you know, that the implications are so vast and profound that no aspect of life on Earth will be changed. I said, yeah, that's why it's secret. It's why it's been so difficult to do this.
President Obama says that there is footage and records of objects in the skies, these unidentified aerial phenomenon, and he says we don't know exactly what they are. What do you think that it is?
I would ask him again. Thank you.
The presidents are on a need-to-know basis in most cases. There's things going on, the whole secret government, the back government, that they can't even make a decision on. They can't stop them. They can't make any they can't even tell them to stop or disclose information. They literally would get laughed at.
When it comes to aliens, there's some things I just can't tell you on air. But what is true, and I'm actually being serious here, is that there's footage and records of objects in the skies that we don't know exactly what they are.
Well, you know, one of the things that Carol Rosin, but also 4-star General Wesley Clark remarked on, is that they've seen documents of this long-term strategic defense plan that's been around ever since World War II, but mainly from the 50s forward, 60-some years. And they saw that the names of countries back in the 70s and 80s that they didn't even think were even on anyone's radar, that were slated to be invaded and to create wars in. And then, of course, the final card that was going to be played was the alien threat card, which is what these false disclosure efforts headed up by folks like Lou Elizondo and others were doing. But I think that what was astonishing to General Clark, this was all just kind of flat out said to him. And he saw this guy, he says, well, should I even know this? And General Clark, the guy briefing the general said, well, not really, it's top secret. But he said, well, then don't tell me. But that is the kind of thing. So let's look at what happened. 9/11 happened 20 years ago or so. And we go into Iraq under completely hoaxed evidence.
Very difficult decision for us to make. No item received more attention, but was of greater concern to us than the possibility that the Iraqi armed forces might use unconventional weapons, or as they are also known, weapons of mass destruction.
Colin Powell's chief of staff has gone on the record saying that it's the biggest mistake of their life, that it turned out that they were set up to go up to the UN and present all these weapons of mass destruction. But who benefited from that? The defense contractors. There were no bid contracts for $150 a gallon for water or fuel to the front lines or the forward operating bases. Same thing with Afghanistan. There were people on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee at that time who said, we really shouldn't invade, we should just take out these terrorist training camps. And so, but why do we get into these quagmires? Because just like in the Vietnam War, when the Gulf of Tonkin happened, they exaggerate a threat, or they create a threat, or they create a false flag operation. Some people think that the Gulf of Tonkin was completely staged. So that ends up causing a lot of patriotism, where people feel they're under attack. Based on that, they can unite people around the war drum, you know, the beating of the war drum.
To all the men and women of the United States Armed Forces now in the Middle East, the peace of a troubled world and the hopes of an oppressed people now depend on you.
A lot of people don't realize the Disclosure Project wasn't done to prove UFOs were real. That evidence was already there. It was to connect all these dots. The technology, the energy, propulsion, the secret agenda for endless war. That's what the Disclosure Project is about. It's not about saying, gee, there's something up in the sky and we don't know what it is. I mean, that's what people think disclosure is in 2021. But in the 90s and early 2000s, we knew that that wasn't the issue. The issue was, what's really behind the secrecy? How is it structured? The public doesn't know what unacknowledged special access projects are. In fact, you know, a lot of top people in the government have never heard of that term, if they haven't been briefed or read into it. So you have to understand all that to then say, well, why really did we get into these quagmires? You have to ask the question, who benefits? Well, people who want to control the population through fear, which leads to war, and people who want to get a lot of money from contracting. It's a very lucrative, the war profiteers and the big trillions of dollars. I mean, we're spending nearly $1 trillion a year now on defense, intelligence, homeland security, all this in the United States. But there are most of that money is going out the door to, again, private contractors. And if you have a budget that big, there's a 20% slush amount. So $1 trillion, couple $100 billion can go into black projects. Nobody knows what the hell's going on. And that's the Frankenstein that got created in the post-World War II era that then got up off the table and is stalking the planet. So that's what people have to view it. It really got out of control. And it's been out of control certainly since the Eisenhower time.
JFK tried to get the information. It's one of the potential reasons why he was assassinated. He really dug deep into the UFO topic. Clinton as well.
UFOs. You've been the president. You've seen all the info. Are they real?
The truth is that we've never proved one, but there are things flying around up there that we haven't fully identified yet.
Obama was well versed in some of the information about the UFOs because they had to try to find a way to launch a mission to deflect an asteroid from hitting Earth, which is still currently going right now. And because of that, he had been briefed on some of the information, but not all of it. But he again said, I can't say anything, it's top secret, there's nothing I can say. And so even Trump as well tried to get it. Hillary Clinton tried to get this information. Podesta tried to get this information. Podesta knew a little something, but he wasn't allowed to release what he did know during the Obama administration. So they have no power. I mean, it's just proof is in the pudding. They really don't have, when it comes to this topic, they have no power at all.
Why aren't they releasing this technology out to the public? One reason is they want to control the high ground, because any military force that controls the high ground controls any battlefield. That's number one. Number two, we definitely have the utilities, right? If this technology, the propulsion systems associated with these different aircraft, if that technology was released into the public domain, the multi-trillion utilities industry could take a serious hit. So you've got internal combustion engines, you've got nuclear power plants, you've got solar, everything else, the coal fire plants, it's not needed anymore. So it could possibly doom those industries, and they're not going to let that happen.
They're just amazing top secret weapons. That's what they are. And we need to start calling this out. Every time some senator or congressman starts saying, hey, I'm on board with these Tic Tacs and with these UFOs, I'm all for this, and we need to ratchet up the fear and that these things are a threat. They're a threat, and they're owned by China, and they're owned by Russia. You know, we need to tell them, we know you're lying. We know that's not true.
We've got reports from 1967 out of Pennsylvania that mimic the form, fit, and function of what the F-18 pilots saw in 2004. So could this technology date back a lot earlier than we think so? Yes, because we've got the clippings that say that not only does it look like the Tic Tac, but it also acts like the Tic Tac, and it had rivets around the outer circumference of the craft itself. Rivets on an extraterrestrial spacecraft sounds a lot more man-made to me. So what we could be looking at with these military fighter pilots interacting with these Tic Tac vehicles is Americans chasing Americans.
Anti-gravity is a pop culture term for what is properly called electromagnetogravitics. So what does that mean? It means very high voltage systems that affect mass. So if you create a mass effect where something becomes massless through the magnetic aspect of electromagnetic fields, it can then be, the propulsion and the speed of it can technically go to infinity. If it becomes not totally massless, it will be incredibly fast. So it's electromagnetic field propulsion. I mean, I don't think you have to make up a bunch of stupid, fanciful terms like UAP and UFO. I mean, this has been known for decades. By the time they used the acronym UFO, they knew they weren't unidentified, and they knew they didn't fly in any normal aerodynamic sense. So all these acronyms that are created by the intelligence community that become the buzzwords in the media, because the media is they're basically, as one of the top media people in the world told me in the 90s, we're scribes taking dictation at the right hand of the king. And the king are these covert programs. And you really don't want to have the average physicist comment on this. I don't care how many degrees they have. 10 degrees from MIT, that and $1.50 gets you on a metro. You simply haven't, those people have not been given access to the physics and the technology behind these. Now that's one level of technology. When you're dealing with transdimensional interstellar, you're talking about another whole order of magnitude. So now you get into what the physicists call non-locality, or entangled, where everything is connected to everything else in space-time. But you're on an operational level. So, like there's been studies and experiments done with teleporting a particle. We're talking about teleporting an entire spacecraft with people on it. That is another level. That's beyond, say, zero point or quantum vacuum or electromagnetic gravitics or electromagnetic field propulsion. So there are different levels of this. And so there's a lot of things going on out there. Some are man-made, some are ET. There are points, it's like circles at subsets that intersect. There's an intersection where a lot of them look very similar and therefore get called the same thing. But they're actually very distinct hallmarks of a man-made versus a true interstellar, which is transdimensional. It's like the Truman Show. Jim Carrey is very interested in what we're doing. And I could tell people, if you look at that old show, Jim Carrey is playing this guy who his whole life is raised in this sort of fake set and wakes up one day and realizes, my whole life has been this staged thing. So I think most people don't realize we're living in somebody's big Truman Show here. The controllers, I call them, who orchestrate these things. And so we kind of have to go, well, we need to have that Jim Carrey moment where we kind of wake up and realize, we've been in a crazy Truman Show here for 70 years since World War II. And get real. That's what we need to do.
I believe if the public found out that we were not alone, that the majority of people have been really prepared over all these last 2 or 3 generations, I believe, to hear it, understand it, digest it. It all depends on the way it's presented. So if it's presented with a fear-backed type of a concept, it's going to be taken very harshly. In other words, if they bring it, the aliens are coming, they're attacking us, they blew up a Navy vessel, we don't know what they're going to do, and they've got control of our nukes.
Let's just go down the rabbit hole here for a second. Let's just assume this is some sort of adversarial or foreign technology that several decades now has managed to leapfrog us and evade all 18 members of the intelligence community, despite our best human intelligence, signals intelligence, imagery intelligence, yada, 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 right? That would be an intelligence failure that would eclipse just about anything else this country has ever faced, especially if this has occurred for decades, that there's a foreign adversary that can put a nuclear warhead within moments over Washington, D.C. Okay, that's a problem.
Well, that kind of disclosure is very bad because that will get everybody in a fear mindset. And when they get into a fear mindset, our frequencies drop in the way that we resonate on the inside. And when the frequencies drop, we can easily be manipulated. Fear allows for easy manipulation. This is why fear is the most things pushed on the news.
This was flying over controlled U.S. airspace, let's say Washington, D.C., over the White House. Would this be an issue? Well, the answer is certainly yes. And the problem here is that these things don't have traditional, let's say, technology associated with aircraft. They don't have wings, they don't have cockpits, they don't have any obvious signs of propulsion, and yet somehow they're able to outperform anything we have in our current inventory.
Fake alien invasion. And the destruction will be real. That's what people don't understand. Fake just means the aliens will be fake. The aliens will be fake, but the destruction on our cities will be real. That's what I want to bring to people. That's what I want to make people understand. And people need to realize this before it's too late, because this operation is going to go to its final conclusion soon. And we see the preparations right now happening everywhere, but we need to recognize them. recognize the preps, and then recognize the psychological operation as well. This is so very important.
If they bring us the information as, look, we discovered that these aliens are real, these are advanced beings, they are really observing us and monitoring us, they want to see how we're going to advance as a civilization, if we're going to make the right decisions and go in the right direction. Are we going to destroy ourselves, or are we going to grow and prosper and head into a golden age? If you present it like that, everybody's going to be like, wow, this is phenomenal news, this is great news. They're going to be very happy and excited. So there's two different ways that they can spin it, and they know one is high frequency, love, joy, excitement. The other one is low frequency, fear-based. And if they come with the fear-based, it's going to horrify a lot of people.
A lot of pressure by the global public and the American public, for answers.
And it's not just the public asking questions. Former intelligence officers and even presidents have been talking about this for weeks. Now, lawmakers on intelligence committees are demanding answers.
When you see Fox News and you see CNN parroting the same vision, the same plan, you know something's wrong. But now we have all the other media joining them. We have Reuters putting out headlines across the world. Hey, these Tic Tacs are evidence. They're proof that we are possibly not alone in the universe. Okay, that's complete bullshit. That is a CIA mind control phrase. That's all that is. And it's being used by several politicians, national figures, celebrities, and that's how you recognize these people, by their language, the language they use. They use the language of threat, of alien UFO threats, these vehicles, these craft. They're not human, they're possibly extraterrestrial in nature. It's all part of the same thing. Now we had this Senate report that never really materialized. It was, people were like, oh, countdown to disclosure. This is great. The Congress is going to report to the NID, the National Intelligence Director. We have Elizondo going everywhere and talking about a bunch of nothing really, because he never offers any evidence to the stuff that he's talking about. And that's because these Tic Tacs, and I'm not revealing anything that's top secret or confidential, these Tic Tacs are American super weapons. They are super weapons. And this relates to other things, other areas of life too, because it is the reason why China could never get into a kinetic war against the United States, because we have these Tic Tacs. One of these Tic Tacs is enough to destroy an entire air force of another country, and we have them. Elizondo is nothing more than an agent of disinformation for nefarious forces. I don't even want to say exactly who those forces are, because they're bad, and they are the ones that are behind putting together this operation. And the fact that Elizondo will not defend his supposed information against anyone of any repute or any knowledge, like Dr. Greer, that tells you everything. That tells you everything right there.
Yeah, Lou's here. There he is. There he is.
I think the ATIP organization that Lou was part of, I think it's a disinformation campaign. It's like a magician. You're going to do something over here, but you're trying to focus. You're trying to have people focus over here when they're not looking. To pull a fast one. The fact that the major media is going to five guys, nobody else, just the five horsemen of the apocalypse, if you want to call it that. They're just narrowing their opportunity to get to the truth. If you're just parroting what the talking points are that they've I don't know if they've been given talking points, but they've been directed to speak in that direction. I think it's doing a disservice to the release of information on aerial phenomena.
Dr. Greer made a statement and called out the five talking heads on the major media. It was a major maneuver, and it kind of shook up the ufology world. He called out Lou Elizondo, among others. We reached out to them all to invite them on a cordial debate. Let's discuss this like grown men. We have received hostile responses to the invitation. Some were quite provocative.
All right. I'm going to assume then that you're not going to take up Dr. Stephen Greer on his offer to have a online live debate on third phase of Moon then.
Who's Greer?
There you go.
I'm kidding. Look, I don't negotiate with terrorists, bottom line.
Yeah, Lou's got some issues. He called you, like he says he doesn't negotiate with terrorists.
Yes, well, I mean, you know, myself and some people who worked with me have been called terrorists, every other thing, traitors, because we're not willing to go along with this corrupt game, and we call it out.
Dr. Stephen Greer coming at you at different angles and all the sublets that they have around them coming at you. I mean, how hard is that to deflect all of that pressure?
Well, you know, it's funny because for 3.5 years they've been taking cheap shots at me, and I haven't said anything. You know, the one time I do just a small retort, you know, they fall to pieces and start crying, and you know, then you're not fair, Lou, and what are you doing? And you know, you're picking a fight. Well, you know,
him calling Dr. Greer a baby and a bully is so appropriate for bad people to do, because we know that bad people always accuse others of doing exactly what they are doing. That's what they do all the time.
I don't know what to tell you, man, but look, Heaven's Gate and Jim Jones comes to mind.
Insane, the moral high ground that he thinks he occupies in this situation.
I think it's turning people against each other. You have these five guys, and they have a narrative. They're not moving from it, and it's not the truth.
He will never debate with anyone that has any knowledge, and for him to say that Dr. Greer is a terrorist or is someone who is lacking in knowledge or truth is ridiculous. It's preposterous, because he is obviously an agent of tremendous disinformation. So it just has no justification.
It is the deadliest attack on U.S. forces in Afghanistan in a decade.
The real terrorists are the people who are killing millions of people a year through pollution, poverty, etc., and committing what I call planeticide, the murder of an entire planet. It's like homicide, but it's a planet. So you have these people who are in cogs in a machine. Now, keep in mind that someone like Lou Elizondo is a very low-level person. He's a foot soldier who has a very teeny little sliver of a portfolio of what to do.
UFOs, unidentified flying objects, are real.
Bill, I think we're beyond that already. The government has already stated for the record that they're real. I'm not telling you that. The United States government is telling you that.
I don't care about personalities. I care about if someone starts getting a stage on 60 Minutes or CNN or Fox News or whatever, and they're reaching millions of people and they're telling provable lies. It's like Senator John Warner's son, John Warner IV, who said, I don't appreciate a Mellon, Chris Mellon, lying to the American people. This is not good for our family brand. Because the Mellons, you know, Paul Mellon started the CIA with Allen Dulles. So I think that there's a lot of the people I work with, a lot of people are very concerned that these folks are counterintelligence specialists posing as sincere researchers, when in reality, they're proffering a narrative of a national security threat that doesn't exist from UFOs. The only threat from UFOs is a national security threat, or from the man-made ones, ironically. And from the secrecy around this issue. Look, I mean, let's look at it. The secrecy around UFOs and the attendant energy and propulsion systems that go along with it are destroying the whole planet. And we have, 70, 80 years of poverty and pollution and all kinds of Mideast war after Mideast war. Look at the debacle going on in Afghanistan and Iraq. So all of that is based on what's the euphemism is our vital national security interest in the Middle East. Let me translate that. Oil. It means oil. What else is there? Date palms, camels, sand. It's oil. So I think we have to call this out. And the people who are kind of shills, who are there kind of, they're sort of pimping for these covert interests, they may not know what the big picture is. I mean, I haven't had a conversation with Lou. to know to what extent he's been read into or briefed on the more sensitive aspects of this. I do know that he's told a person I've known for many years that he had been in a facility where there was an ET craft stored. Now, if that's true, then he certainly shouldn't be saying to the American public, gee, we don't know what these are. So the people out there who keep pushing this fear agenda, I think most people in the UFO world don't know that that's what they're doing, that they're just sort of parroting disinformation that's been embedded into the research and books and documentaries on the subject. But that's really where it's coming from. The origins of all that mythology of aliens doing this and that is all coming from a CIA program that's designed to scare the hell out of people. Why do you want people to be afraid? A, you control people through fear. And B, you can justify a war. 300-foot whale, I think. So we put this in. See, there you go. So we're out in the country, so if we lose power, we'll have this, and this is, my wife can't move this, but I can, so. And probably my oldest grandson can. So it's kind of, you can fill up buckets, and we put this on here 23 years ago.
First of all, you've got your crown jewels. These are the birds that they don't talk about. You've got something called ace in the hole technology. That also falls under the same category. Then you've got something called silver bullets, which also falls under these mysterious aircraft. Then you've got something called trump card technologies. And when you put all these together, this really explains things that are in the unknown, you could say, level of things that you would never see at your local air show. So when you talk about white world technology, we're discussing things that you would see at a local air show. F-15, F-16, F-14's retired now, you might not see that, you might see that in a museum. Those are all falling under the category of white world classified, unclassified aircraft. The other ones, which I think you're familiar with, that would be something that in the white world, we're told that every year that goes by within the white world, 42 years goes by in that so-called other world. So if that theoretical model is true, and if it holds true, then what you see all around when you go outside your bedroom window is nothing more than a total construct. We're living in the Matrix. They're living in a completely different world.
This is for cows. So this is used, oh, here it comes. We do this with the grandkids. Bye! Oops, that's fine. Well, we bought this place for this. It has a 100-mile view of the Blue Ridge, Shenandoah National Park, Blue Ridge. It's, 65 acres and private, and it's a place to hide. It's safe and secure. So we have great neighbors, wonderful people out here. So we decided this is the place to be to, have some solace and peace. So.
Is there any regrets that you had?
I've never been a person to, look at regrets and wish I could have, should have, proud've. I just sort of, there are things you learn from. There are mistakes certainly that have been made, that I've made about people that I trust that I shouldn't have. But that's the nature of anything that you do that's going to be controversial. It's almost like prepositioned weapons of mass destruction for people's minds that are out there on this entire subject, because it's sitting out there, and people aren't aware that the intelligence community is very good at staging false alien events. And people say, I'm always asked, when is this false flag going to happen? I said, it started in the late 50s. You missed the whole point of my narrative. I mean, it's like that In Vogue song, free your mind. You got to free your mind from all the garbage that you have been sort of sucking into your awareness and you've been force-fed this stuff since the 50s and 60s. So the ability to stage false alien events and deceive people has been around since I was a child, and I think this is not being accounted for. And at this point, I'm very much focused on exposing that. If you look at the presidential briefing documents we do, a big part of it has to do with the staging of false, what the Pentagon calls deceptive indications and warnings. Pop culture call it false flag, where there are things that are staged that exist out there, not just what's going to happen, but what's already in the evidence. It's sort of like you put one little bit of truth so it's believable, and then that's the sweet part on the outside. Inside's the poison pill of false information. So that's how counterintelligence operates. I've known that since the 90s, but I think that that's the biggest mistake we've made, is probably not being very clear about that. We discovered that Jacques Vallée admitted to having this document that proves what we've been saying for 25, 26 years, and that is that the intelligence community has been hoaxing a lot of these so-called alien events for their psychological warfare value, to scare people. That's something that every politician, senior military official, whatever, need to be told early on, because that is not something you're going to get from an intelligence committee briefing or from a hearing. I've never seen any of these sort of meetings happen where the people coming in talk about, oh yeah, and in the back room here we have a bunch of spooks, intel guys staging all this nonsense and then moving it through their cutouts, their operatives in the UFO subculture.
The United States owns this technology, basically. But right now, we're caught in a war between the cabal, black hats, and the white hat military. And they are trying to take control of all these tic tacs, because neither side has total control of these tic tacs. That's where we are right now. And we have so many politicians, so many people. This operation started way back with John Podesta that you can see in WikiLeaks. He had a secret plan with Tom DeLonge from Blink 182, that they had this big plan to capture the youth of America in the subject of ufology and to capture their imagination. And we see that that was part of this plan also. So there's no shortage of politicians that want to be a part of this psychological operation. Not just politicians, but celebrities and network news people that all want to be part of this. That's why it's getting bigger and bigger. It's not stopping. Obama, just last week, was asked for a statement on this. And he said, reliably, he said, well, yeah, it's looking like people are really believing in this area of UFOs with the Tic Tacs, and it's going to lead to increased defense budgets.
Space is hard. It used to be all we had to worry about was astrophysics, Kepler's law, gamma rays, solar flares, rocket science, black holes, and the theory of relativity.
Talk about a nod to the military-industrial complex. That's what he just did. He just notified the military-industrial complex that they're going to benefit from this psychological operation to ratchet up the fear surrounding UFOs.
They're leading into a very soft disclosure where we will get the announcement of alien life coming in just a couple of more years, and that's going to be from the Mars Perseverance rover. It has a science kit on it that's able to detect life on Mars, even though they know that there's life on Mars currently and in the past. This will give them the ability to say, yes, we discovered aliens are real, and the aliens in this case will be bacteria, either a bacteria or a virus, or maybe both. Something that's going to make us feel like there's a potential threat. And again, the reason why I believe this is because I think that they want to really drive trillions of dollars into the Space Force, because there's nobody left to take over on this planet. There's no other countries left at this moment to keep the money going into the war machine. And so to keep the war machine going, they got to keep the fear in the people. And the next big thing is, well, let's move weapons into space. Let's create space weapons. Let's create spacecraft now. Let's go there. And that's gonna, that's gonna allow us to continue to employ ourselves, be on the board of directors of all of these private corporations, and collect a lot of revenue.
The UFO threat is being exposed by this former Defense Department official.
I think if the major media, I call it the fake media, were to get wind and have actually some evidence of we're working with alien entities, alien beings, or in some type of intelligence from another world. If it was me, I would it would be the front page of the New York Times. But I think that the media is in compliance with the federal government as far as keeping secrets. Well, they ridiculed and tried to destroy Bob Lazar.
Examples of technology that is seemingly beyond human capabilities.
I did not believe that this should be a security matter. Some of it, sure. But just the concept that there's definite proof. We even have articles from another world, another system. You just can't not tell everyone.
Anybody who comes out and said that they have experienced an abduction or have experienced a sighting or experienced chasing one in an airplane or whatever, the media even today, not as much as it was 5 years ago, but the media today I think is going to paint you as a fool.
T. Townsend Brown and then the stuff done by Marcel Vogel, they were using crystalline materials and to put very high voltage systems through coils through the crystal, and they would get the crystals would actually vibrate and pull energy in from the 0 point, and they would, even if they hit the right resonance, a frequency cycle per second, they would levitate. Literally, they had levitation that took place, they observed. So that was way back in the 20s with T. Townsend Brown, whose work eventually became, got incorporated into the RAND Corporation, the RAND think tank in California. So there's a lot. The biggest secrets are not the 0 point energy and electrogravitics. It's the science of consciousness. It's the trans-dimensional physics that go interfacing with thought and consciousness. What Elon Musk is trying to do with Neuralink, where you can think to your computer and it turns it on. These were technologies that were developed in the 50s and 60s in highly classified projects. The interstellar civilizations, I always tell people, do you really think they're going to be using a cell phone? I mean, why would ETs be using 19th century and 20th century communication systems? They don't. So their whole paradigm is non-locality in physics, all right, where things can be in multiple places at once. Einstein called it the spooky effect. All their communication systems are moving through the consciousness field and are thought actuated. So people go, oh, that's so far out there. I say, it's only far out there because people have been lied to. If these are extraterrestrials or real and they're getting here from another star system, they're not using 20th century or early 21st century technology, right? They're using a whole new type of physics. And the big breakthroughs in that are not 0 point energy or anti-gravity, it's this other stuff. The people at the CIA call it WSFM, weird science and frickin' magic. And my uncle's old company, Northrop Grumman, they just call it PFM, pure fucking magic. I mean, excuse my language, but that's literally what the engineers call it. But these civilizations that are interstellar mastered all those WSFM technologies 100,000 years ago, a million years ago. And so that is why everyone in the senior ranks of the intelligence community always have respected what we were doing with CE5 contact, because they know that is the biggest secret. That's a much bigger secret than anti-gravity or 0 point energy, by far. Orders of magnitude more sensitive.
Whatever they are, whether they're humans or whether they're whatever, if they were a threat, I think we would know it by now. If they have the ability to go across the universe in a blink of an eye, if they have the ability to stop a nuclear detonation, if they have the ability to, fly in formation with a ICBM that's taken off in a test flight, then they have the ability to obliterate Earth if they wanted to, or remove all humans from the planet. I think you're curious what we're up to, if they are in fact alien entities. If they were a threat, again, we would be dominated right now.
If you were president, what would you do first?
Well, no, I have no interest in politics or being a politician. I would be the worst politician ever because I'm very honest, I can't be bought, and I'm very direct and very blunt. So I don't think that would be, I have no interest in that at all. However, if I were the President of the United States, the very first thing I would do is issue an executive order declaring these projects illegal and unconstitutional and getting control of them. That's what we recommended. That's what we recommended to every president, and that was in the original papers and the set of executive recommendations that I gave to the CIA director for Bill Clinton in '93, because that needs to happen officially. You really can't tiptoe past the graveyard on that. What I found is that most people who are in those positions, they don't really understand, have the time, because they have 1,000 things on their plate every day, to drill down on the issue enough to even feel comfortable with what to do about it. It's a big problem. That's one of the issues with the secrecy. When the secrecy exists, it creates this hermetically sealed system. And so if you're either inside or spent 30 years figuring out the lay of the land, or a long time, or you're on the outside. If you're on the outside, you're really looking into it through a glass dimly. So you either don't know at all, or you have someone around you who's deceiving you. And I think for that reason, the presidency is very vulnerable because the secrecy is so well structured. It's well structured as an unacknowledged, very black. And I think the Director of National Intelligence report that just came out, it's not clear to me that it was, sort of this anodyne, rather empty report because it was part of the ongoing cover-up, or the people who were trying to get the information were denied access. The public thinks you're the president and the president's men have an all-access pass. In reality, they not only do not have an all-access pass, they're usually not told anything, and even if they're told something, they don't have what I call command authorization. In other words, they may, in our briefing documents, we list the facilities, the corporations, where they are, who's running them, where the underground bases are, everything. But knowing it and getting access control, where you have access but can control what's going there, two very different things. And Obama even admitted, I think on Jimmy Kimmel or something, he says, well, we're told to not talk about this. Well, who's telling them not to talk about it? If you're the President of the United States, you can classify or declassify executively anything you want. People don't think, when someone makes a statement like that, they're actually very subtly trying to educate people on where the real power is resting. And it's not at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue or on Capitol Hill. It's not where the power is. And that's very hard for people to get their minds around. Because if you look at the media and how we're educated, everyone thinks that that's the way the world runs. And my coming of age on this was in the early and mid 90s, where I realized that's not how the world runs. That's the myth. The reality is something much more stark and brutal.